Disclaimer: the following program contains the views and opinions of the hosts, speakers, and participants. They do not reflect the policies of the producers, advisors, and advertisers of AU Paws Radio, its advisors, advertisers, nor the position of Adelphi University, the Board of Trustees, administrative faculty, or its affiliates. Paws Web radio station encourages freedom of speech but does not endorse any specific viewpoints or messages. Listener discretion is advised, especially for potentially sensitive or controversial topics. All right, hello, welcome to another segment of Songs in Stardust. I'm Eric, and I'm here with Roman. And on this week's segment, we'll be talking about Dean Blunt's Black Metal 1 and 2. But honestly, I'll probably just talk about the artist in general, but I picked these two albums because there's some pretty popular songs off of it. To sort of start off, I'd say the best way I could describe Dean Blunt is his instrumentals are very interesting. He has like a lot of dreamy guitar riffs. And it's difficult to put into words, but when I had been first introduced to him, it was something I had never really heard before. I was actually introduced to him by one of my close friends, and she kind of just put it on, and I was like, wow, this is kind of crazy. Like, this is cool. And I kind of just delved deeper into it. And to sort of like start off, his most popular song is 100. And it's an interesting song because it's this weird feeling that it kind of gives off. It's sort of like melancholic in a weird sense that like, that's the best way I could describe Dean Blunt's songs, is that it's kind of like happy sounding, but also sort of sad, because it just kind of makes you think. And his lyricism is also interesting, but it's also very vague. So he's one of those guys where like it is very kind of quote unquote artsy fartsy, where like it's kind of up to you what you want to interpret it as. But my personal experience listening to him really started when I vividly remember I went to a trip to Pennsylvania with a group of friends. And I remember I would put on Dean Blunt within my headphones, and we sort of like just kind of drove around Pennsylvania on his way to this like sort of house up in the mountains. And it's this interesting thing where like after I had listened to it and gone through that trip, every time I listen to like specific songs from Dean Blunt, I'm just like, I vividly remember like everything I was doing at that time, or like that sort of era. And I guess to sort of like introduce it into like the themes of Songs in Stardust is like about the human condition. And I sort of wanted to propose this kind of topic of like when you listen to music and it sort of reminds you of certain things, or like it kind of like you know when you smell like a familiar fragrance and it kind of hits you back to like a certain time in your life. Like for example, like Christmas, you might smell like, I don't know, for me, when I smell pine cones, I think of like the living room when I was younger. It's kind of like that. It's kind of hard to articulate, but that's how I feel with Dean Blunt's songs at times, is that I'll listen to him, and specifically certain songs from Black Metal 1 and 2. It's this interesting thing where I'm just kind of brought back to an earlier time, and not even that much earlier. Like I maybe took this trip maybe like a year ago, and yeah, I don't know. It's very nostalgic and it's very fun. So I kind of just want to talk about that, of like maybe other songs that we've maybe listened to that have brought back certain memories.
So yeah, Eric, I think, has a really, really cool attachment to this album and project. I don't really feel the same way. I definitely came in trying to be very open-minded to the entire project, but I think at the end, it's gonna take me like a little bit to kind of get into, or even if I even get into it at all. I did appreciate that this is such a big artist, and the production level on it is nothing that's like insane, that is like to be praised, or like like that's gonna be like sought after. But I did kind of appreciate that because I think it shows that there is this ingenuity behind like making stuff, that it doesn't have to like sound perfect. It doesn't have to sound like super smooth to the ear, as long as the idea and what you're trying to convey is there. It can be a really cool idea, and I think that's something that happens a lot with younger artists, especially when you look back at people's earlier projects, is you can see and hear just how rough their stuff sounded, but like there's sometimes like amazing little ideas or like motifs that are being shown or shine through, but it's just the idea that we kind of need a certain level of like polish on what we listen to, which kind of sucks because it makes us very like picky about what we listen to. But I think listening to this album, it kind of forces you to be like a little more open to the production and like what good sounding music can be like, even if it's not like perfect and all shiny and polished. Because I listened to this with like very the Audio Technica headphones, and it was still kind of like you can hear all the little blemishes. You can hear the reverb in the background. You can hear the like the straddling of the guitar strings. But even in that, I think it was really cool. I don't know if it was done creatively or if it was done on purpose or not, but I think it was a cool kind of thing to incorporate into an album where we're so used to like like kind of an organic feeling being gone almost completely, and everything being like sterilized in our music. So I thought that was really cool. I liked how it kind of confused me. I think that was the cool part of it. Like I couldn't really place what this was genre wise. I couldn't really like call it anything, because like Eric said, it had like reminiscent things of like shoegaze with like very like twinkly guitars, but at the same time there was like kind of like a country like Midwest emo vibe to it. But like I couldn't even really call it that, because there's like just rapping in between. There's like melodic samples that are going on. So I think it does a really good job just being its own thing, and I think that's at the end of the day what art should do anyway. So I give it praise for that, even though I can't even really like say I fully enjoyed it or fully understood the entire experience. I think it was just cool to kind of like see a subversion of that for an album.
Yeah, so to sort of continue off of what Roman was saying, as he was talking, I found it interesting with the way that he had felt about it, because honestly, I don't really know many people who listen to him either, so it's only like me and my friend, and I only have that perspective, and we kind of both like agree why we like it, but it's always interesting to hear someone else's take on it. And I actually had never really thought anything of the production, but that's just because the difference in our backgrounds, you know what I mean? Like I'm not as into music, so I wouldn't catch on the things that like Roman would catch on to. So I think that's really cool. And to sort of give a little bit more of insight of Dean Blunt as an artist, in specific interviews, he like heavily criticizes the music industry. Like he's kind of like I know he lives in like London and like Europe, and so he's in that kind of like weird obscure scene. But in interviews, he basically kind of describes his role in the music industry. Like he doesn't really want anything to do with it. He kind of sees it as, it's almost, he like compares it, and he said this in an interview, I forgot which one, but he's like, to me, making music is like clocking into a job, and I do what I want and I do what I have to do, but I don't want to talk to my coworkers. I just kind of want to get out of here, and like, once I'm done, I'm out of here. So that's his kind of perspective, is like, he doesn't care about what other people are doing. He kind of just does his own thing. And it doesn't mean like, oh, he's like better than ever. Like it kind of can seem a bit pretentious, but it's just kind of like his expression. He doesn't really have like, he doesn't try to accommodate like, an audience. It's just kind of him. And yeah, it's very difficult to describe how his music sounds. And one thing that he had mentioned is like the country aspect of it. I always found that very interesting. Like it almost reminds me of like something you'd hear in like Red Dead Redemption or something like that. And that's what kind of gave it more, I guess, it had an effect on me when I was in like the more rural side of Pennsylvania in like a different part of America. which isn't that far from New York, but it's just different from where I live. And so I think I really associate that sort of music atmosphere, and like I associated it where the places I was visiting and the things that I was seeing, and I think it just kind of came together and made it into like some. It's like that thing from Inside Out where you get like that core memory or something. Like it was a really fun trip. But yeah, and just also like another thing I really like about it. He collaborates with a lot of different people. He has a lot of different projects, and like to be honest, even though I'm a really big fan of his work, he just does so much stuff. He has so many projects that like I can't even keep up with, and I might not even really like. But I specifically chose Black Metal 1 and 2 just because like it features more iconic songs, as I said before. But he also has other albums, and he collaborates with different people. One notably, she's known as Joanne Robertson, and she brings like amazing vocals to some of his songs. Like he'll do all the production and the instrumentals, and you just have like this really beautiful vocalist where she's just, I don't know, it just mixes really well with the instrumentals, and like certain songs give this extreme sense of like peace and tranquility to me. And as Roman said, like I'm really appreciative that, you know, when you kind of are like getting into something or someone trying to like introduce something to you, you kind of go in with an open mind. But I understand his sentiment, because like for me, I don't think I actually really liked him at first. I only really listened to it because my friend had wanted me to listen to him. And over time, I just kind of like, I think I was just bored. I think I just put it over the radio, like over in my car a few times on the way back and from, to and from school is what I meant to say. And it just grew on me. And like, I was like, oh, this is pretty cool. Like at first I was like, this is really weird. I've never heard anything like it. And I actually really didn't have anything to compare it to what I had listened to before. But I just kept listening to it, and I was like, oh, this is really cool. And it just grew on me. And I really like when that happens. It's like a lot of the time when you try something out, you're very hesitant, or like, you're like, oh, this might not really like suit me, or like kind of like fit alongside with the things I already like. But like you just kind of listen to it, like you don't really think much of it, and you just keep going with it, and then suddenly like you're a fan of it. So I think that's really cool and interesting.
I think what Eric brings up is a really cool kind of idea too, that even the experiences that we have around like the art in certain times in our lives can be super like fundamental in how we like look back at it later. Because for us, when we listen to these things, it's kind of just to dive into them and kind of discuss what we feel and what we talk about them. But I think it's so cool to tell the difference between like someone like Eric, who has such an attachment and kind of like story with this album, and like me, who's just, you know, like basically at the start of that. And I think that's what good art should do. Like I think good art should like grow with you. Like you should be able to kind of like look back at it and be like, yeah, what was I listening to? What was I experiencing at this all the same time? Like it was kind of interesting just to hear his story with it, and for him to end up like associating it with the, you know, Pennsylvania and like the wilderness almost. I think that was really, really cool that you can do that. And I have so many other experiences like that where in my life some kind of like musical project has come in and I've used it to kind of like help me get through, or like what's that called? Like trans fixate on something that like was in my head a lot. So I think it's really cool that like, you know, someone was able to even just have that experience with this project.
Yeah, I just wanted to touch one more thing that Roman had kind of brought up, of like having an experience with music. Yeah, I think certain albums within my life or certain songs that I had listened to kind of accompanied through like a certain time. And specifically with Dean Blunt, I remember starting college like really anxious and really worried about like, what am I supposed to do? Like, how do I get used to this? And I remember like whenever I was distressed, I would listen to some songs, and like I had no idea like maybe what the song was about, or like, you know, I don't really know his artistical intentions of like what he's trying to convey, and that happens a lot. But I think it's that interesting thing that like, you know, that's what art kind of should be. Like, yes, like the artist has a message to say, but it's also interesting when you kind of like almost make your own interpretation of it. And I think I do that a lot. And I don't think it's a good or bad thing, because like that's just kind of like what experiencing art is, you can kind of make it what you want it to be. And for me, like, even though I don't really know what he's trying to convey, it's kind of like, all right, then I kind of made my own meaning out of it, where I'm like, oh yeah, like I remember I listened to this song when I was freaking out, and this kind of like calmed me down, or like associated with the trip that I really enjoyed. So yeah, I think everyone should sort of just feel free to like interpret things however you want. Obviously, like people will have different interpretations, but you can, I think that's what makes things fun to get into, is that you kind of make meaning out of it from your own personal experiences. So that's cool. But that's all I had to say.
So yeah, as Eric said, we had a really good time just kind of going over why this project is kind of like a bigger picture for us as people, to just kind of be open to these new experimental ideas with art, and not just shut it out immediately, and see how it can end up affecting us even when we don't really expect it. So I hope all you guys enjoy listening to that. Next week we will be back, and we will be talking about 21 Pilots and their album Trench, and how they made a whole universe, and we'll be diving into that universe and talking about what it means to kind of be a fan of something, and how you can get involved and how you can get people involved in what you create. So once again, thank you all you local dreamers and stargazers for listening, and I'll catch you guys next time. Thank you so much. Have a good one. Peace out.